Are there other things that so I mean, you gave great examples around lead times and cash management, sort of frugality, stretching the dollar, so to speak, that were sort of reactive to that time period. Were there other things that you learned during that time that have stuck in terms of the way that you manage cash and people and clinical trials?
Um, I think from the people side, definitely.
Mm,
Um, so at AM Pharma, what we implemented. So when we set out to rebuild the organization to do phase three and commercial transition to commercial is, building a large hub in the Netherlands. We recruited people from the US indeed to the Netherlands, and I wanted to build a tightly knit culture around a single center where everybody had to come in the head office before we would, spread out and maybe get local operations. Well, then COVID came along. So there was no office. And it turned out that a team is very well manageable at a remote basis. So we changed our hiring policy and we just said we want the best person. And
mm,
it doesn't really matter where the location is. So we had people scattered in, the US, across Europe, and still a relatively modest team eventually of 35 people. And it worked fine. So I think there needs to be a strong company culture that needs to be shared. There has to be sufficient, of course, face-to-face time opportunities. So going back to the mothership frequently to engage with the team or sub-teams is important. Organizing your offsites is important. But I think, articulating a concrete, explicit culture that is carried by everybody, where collaboration, for example, and accountability are typically important ingredients of, I think is pivotal. And then it really doesn't matter that not everybody is at the same time at the same moment. So we share information, and we're doing that again now at Memo Therapeutics. So we have people in the US now, across Europe, built a great culture. We've expanded the team, not doubled yet, but almost doubled since when I joined about 8 months ago. Um, but yeah, it works. If there's a collaborative spirit and a strong corporate culture, a willingness to share and help each other, it works. And I think that is really my key learning from COVID. And I see that now being applied across many different biotechs, also the ones that I'm on the board.
yeah.
So that's a new way of working, and that's definitely there to stay.
How do you pressure test the I guess work ethic and collaborative wherewithal of people that you may be bringing on board? How do you know? How do I know that Eric Vandenberg, although he's in the Netherlands and I can't like watch him sit at his desk and do his work all day? How do I know that he's not going to walk his dog and take his kids on picnics and do things like that when I really need him to be doing important work and sharing it with the team?
Yeah. Well,
I
how
mean,
would you
it's
know
a,
if so?
it's an interesting, like, how do it's a character assessment, but it's got to be a challenge.
it, it's a character assessment. At the same time, I think it's a false control prerogative that you think if people come to the office, they are productive for the 9 hours that they stare into, a TV screen.
True.
Yeah. So at least the biotechs that I have experience in, the teams are always small. So if somebody is not contributing to what the tasks are that the person is responsible for, you'll know,
Yeah, it's
right? Because
glaring.
you miss deadlines. The quality is not there of
Yeah.
documents that you're reviewing. You're in pitch situations together. So it's kind of obvious. You just need to stay switched on. And is, somebody still contributing or is somebody hiding? And that's why I still like to have, for example, frequent moments with the team, also face to face, because sometimes, of course, body language speaks more than what you would get from either a Zoom call like this. So I think that's still information that you need to complete the picture
Yeah.
and to have these face-to-face discussions or dinner together, etc. But yeah, I don't feel the need to control people on a day-to-day activity. We'll make agreements on what the expectations are, what needs to be delivered when. We agree on how things will be done, and then we evaluate what the result is, and
Yeah.
that is a feedback loop. So I think that's probably the way people like to work, where there is responsibility. So when you hire people, because that was part of your question, so how do you know? Yes, character traits are, I guess, important. Um, if somebody can be independent, a self-starter, I think that's important. Part of that is also baked into experience. So it's really difficult if somebody comes from large pharma and didn't have any prior biotech experience and then starts in biotech.
Mm-hmm.
That's quite a change.
Yeah.
The way of working is really different because we don't have a gazillion, experts or support groups supporting your activities. You have to do it yourself. You have to be productive yourself and be, forthcoming and engage with the team. So I typically like profiles that have had both that large pharma as biotech experience for the senior roles. And of course, for the more junior roles, it's really about the learning capacity. So does somebody have the potential to grow in his or her role? So those are key, factors for evaluation at the beginning.
Yeah.
And as soon as you feel that you don't trust anybody, right? So if that's already there, then don't do it. Don't give somebody the advantage of the doubt there, just because
Yeah.
you put somebody already at a bad start from the beginning. So you need to be very enthusiastic of the people that you hire.
Yeah. Very good. All right, so we're going to move on to another point of chaos. We're kind of working on on a chronological continuum here. Post COVID, money just went away. All that gluttony was people were left hungry because the money dried up in a hurry. Um, I mean, you've ascertained that you've done a good job with multiple companies obviating for that, preserving cash, stretching the dollar, but still, it creates a moment of, the necessity for some management finesse to see that coming, make sure that you're going to be able to keep the lights on and the paychecks rolling indefinitely, not knowing when the market's going to come back. So tell us a little bit about that. How have you gone about being good at, still placing good bets and still maintaining the course when money is not as readily available as it once was?
Yeah, it's true. It's more difficult to raise funding currently. Certainly, doing IPOs is not really back to its normal. I think you see that investors place their bets on the winners. It's kind of the winner takes it all strategy, certainly in the public market. The private market, it depends on where you are. Europe, it was still pretty well until recently, I think. You see more larger rounds being done, of course, early on. So setting up companies for success. I think I'll come back to a point that I already mentioned. I think focus is still very important. Um, so yeah, maybe the example of the company that I currently work on with Memo Therapeutics. So we have one program in the clinic that we need to make sure is successful. So what we've done in the last half year is extended the financing round. So we were able to raise further funding. Total C round was 45 million Swiss francs to really do a robust phase 2 study with an antibody that addresses the BK virus in a kidney transplantation setting. So that's a virus that we all carry, but if you're on strong immunosuppressions, you get opportunistic infections, which basically then destroys the kidney because that's where the cells reside. So addressing it is really important, and currently there's nothing out there. So we wanted to make sure that we had the money to address that. So focusing on the trial, analyzing, for example, the powering of the study, what were the regulatory feedback, so that we really place the company in the best position to have the maximum chance to address the potential risks that we see, but also address the questions that the regulators have, including now also involving the potential commercial questions. What is important for payers? What's important for patients and as for physicians? So those are things that we're all accelerated and took on board with a real focus to, once we have the data, we should be able to accelerate quickly into phase 3. At the same time, we had a discovery platform of different programs that were ongoing. We probably had about 4 programs ongoing. Mm-hmm. And together with the team, we decided to really focus that only in one area. So we support, of course, the BK program that's in the clinic. But the other activity that we now do is evaluate the TLS biology, I like to call it, so tertiary lymphoid structures, which are predictive for good outcome in solid tumor cancers. And that is basically now, more and more explored in the last 5 or 6 years. But, what are these tertiary lymphoid structures doing? Well, they're maturing B cells to produce certain antibodies that apparently are very effective in addressing the tumors and its metastasis. So our technology can identify these antibodies and then identify the targets that they're addressing. And in that way, we might be able to find new antibody or new epitopes for new targets or existing targets and directly move that into the clinic. So that focusing, I think, of the discovery, not doing too much in parallel, but concentrating your efforts on what you think delivers has the highest chance to deliver results on the shortest time frame, and with that being the cheapest, I think is something that we at least took to heart within Memo Therapeutics. And I already gave you the example on Lava Therapeutics, where we said, okay, so we're going to partly, of course, partner a platform of clinical stage assets because you cannot carry multiple clinical stage assets forward if your budget is limited, because you burn very quickly throughout your money.
Yeah. You've had a lot of experience raising money and maintaining financing with multiple companies. So you've got good perspective on the application of that focus to the investor market, to the capital markets, right? Like I think, right, like given your experience, I think it's safe for me to assume that if your company was focused, as you said, is so important, but the focus was on something that perhaps wasn't palatable or isn't palatable to sustenance from the greater market, you'd know it and you would correct course. I mean, that's a general safe assumption. So that leads to the question I would ask you, and that is to share, I guess, some perspective on the hallmarks of knowing that what you're focused on is going to be palatable to the investment community, or perhaps the big pharma might have an interest in that. Like there's something transactable down the road, because I think it's fairly common for especially science-based founders to get swept up in the science and perhaps lose sight of the market. So just some thoughts around like what are the boxes you check to ensure that what your team is heads down and sleeves rolled up working on is going to be received well?
A pivotal question. Thank you for that. And maybe to stereotype a little bit, but where in research you might go from hypothesis to hypothesis and do an experiment and then plot your way and find out where you are, and then we'll solve other problems later. Mm-hmm. I think in a development setting and for successful companies, you have to start with the end in mind. What do we need to have in the end to have a package that can convince the regulators, investors, pharma partners that this is attractive and valuable? So you have to have a sense of what that is that you need to deliver. So, for example, in Memo Therapeutics, we, of course, need to have great phase 2 data, and we need to have an agreed plan with the authorities on what the phase 3 will look like. Because it's a novel indication, the development path is unknown. What is the endpoint that you need to choose for phase 3? And there are many examples of that, of course, in biotech, where those are uncertainties until you walk the path. But you cannot plan ahead for that. So if you know that you need to have a robust end of phase 2 meeting, then, okay, what is the data that I need to bring to that meeting to be successful? And then you can think back, okay, but how do we get there? What can we build into the trial? What do we do separately? Maybe as from registry analysis. What do we do preclinically to support the story there? And then what I personally very much like to do is to interact with pharma, because each pharma, again, is different because there are different people working in these companies and they have different strategies. So you get different answers, what they find important for them to transact. And for some, it's indeed more the commercial case. And for others, it might be a distribution of a molecule and so forth and so further. And being able to make then the data package addressing these answers, increasing your chance that you will fund the company further or transact at that moment in time. I think those are important factors to take in. So really begin with the end in mind and then work back.
Yeah. And know your, it sounds like know your audience too, right? Like know your audience. And it's, yeah.
Yeah, and if you don't know them, get to know them. All right,
Yeah.
it's free consulting advice. Pharma companies in the end mostly are the customers of biotech. We sell the biotech or the product to a pharma. That's where, say, 80%, 90% of the companies end up somewhere in their life. So it's good to know your customer.